Internet. Pete Herr of the Geekiverse here with my good buddy Aaron O'Brien of the Synthaholics duo and Numina Comics. And we're going to talk a little bit about comics for a minute or two. Aaron, in addition to being the world's best podcaster, is also a comic book artist. And I find that moderately fascinating. And wanted to learn a little bit about that. So how'd you get involved in that? Like, when did you decide that was something you wanted to do?
I've basically been drawing my whole entire life. And actually, probably since I was a kid, I came across a box of old comics as I was 6 or 7 years old of terrible drawings, but you know, that's me doing comic books at that age. And I just kept going, just kept drawing. A lot of times, my biggest issue was I didn't take it seriously for a long time, you know, so I didn't really focus a lot of my energy towards it. So, and there came a point where I was like, I should really just aim a lot of energy towards this and learn how the pros do it. And I have for that time, you know.
So this wasn't just an excuse to draw hot women?
I don't draw a lot of hot women, a lot of hot men. But
nice. Nice. So you were a comic book guy as a kid? I mean, clearly you found a box of them sitting around, so...
Yeah, as a kid I used to read comics all the time. I think my first comic was an Avengers comic, and I just fell in love with it ever since. I loved the Superman movies back in the 70s, 80s, and everything that came from that. I loved the old Batman series, Adam West, so that was great. So yeah, I just was totally enthralled in comics.
Who was your favorite comic book character growing up?
It was a toss-up when I was younger between Superman and Hulk. And then my taste kind of changed. I got into the X-Men a lot. I really loved Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler was one of my favorite characters at the time, especially in the late 80s, 90s. And Aquaman, also from DC. Especially in the 90s, he kind of got rebooted, and they really made him a lot different.
Yeah, so. I was mostly a Marvel guy. Totally a Spider-Man.
Spider-Man's great
Spider-Man fan. Totally, yeah. He was my guy. So let's talk about putting together a comic real quick. Like, what's the process on that? You start with a.
Well, there's two things. One, you need to do. You have to visualize everything, and you have to almost break it down like a movie. So you've seen movie storyboards where, you know, they have, you know, this is what the character's doing, this is the action sequence, or how you have to think exactly like that, except you're telling it in a slower pace, and you have to let the reader's mind imagine what's happening in between each panels. So they're making that jump, you know, so you're not going to spell out each piece of action that's happening in the story. And on top of that, you have to have dialogue that tells a story, but tells it in a nice flow that doesn't get the reader bogged down in it. Because it's got to move as well. It's got to have action. It's got to have some flashy pictures in it. So it's just, there's a balance. So even before the artist does anything, whoever's writing the comic has to really have a good idea on how to tell a story in a comic book world. So it's different than a standard novel, and it's different than writing a movie script. So it's a little bit of both. So you got to kind of marry them.
And you've collaborated with a handful of different people.
Yeah. So I originally got involved. This is going back maybe 5 years ago. I did the comic with my friend Jason Gussman called Return to Snakeland, which takes place a story that actually it's actually based in Buffalo, Kenmore area, but we kind of changed the names and locations because. It was
because Kenmore doesn't want to be.
Kenmore doesn't want.
They don't want things held against them in Kenmore.
They don't want to be implied in some of the dirty things that happened back in the 80s. So he told this story, and I didn't really I didn't know him at the time, but I was reading his blog, and I decided to illustrate his blog, and I started sending him my artwork, and he's like, "Oh, could you do more?" And then we got to know each other. We had a couple drinks, and we became great friends since then, and. We are currently trying to wrap that up into a graphic novel, and to have that all set up so people could just purchase for one full story. And the Numina comic, that's something with me and my friend Phil Bowman. We're working on a universe of different characters and how the characters interact, but we're going to do mainly online at first, like a web comic, and then we're going to slowly release comics as time goes on when we have enough content to do that.
And web comic, enlighten us a little bit on a web comic. Is that the equivalent of a full episode, like a full monthly?
Yeah, a lot of web comics do different things. I mean, it's all according when they release time, but a lot of them do like a weekly release date where they'll basically have like one page per week. And so if you're a reader, you keep up with just the story once per week. Sometimes they do like twice a month, but it's all according to what the artist schedule's like. And there's tons of web comics out there you can find that some are just incredible, that you're just like blown away, and the stories are great. And they're completely not affiliated with Marvel or DC. They're their own characters. There's stuff that's, superhero based, sci-fi, fantasy, steampunk. There's so much out there. And there's artists that are just kind of forging their own paths, and they're writing amazing stories. And they're totally worth it, and the art's amazing as well. So
I'm sort of fascinated now with the business story of Dark Horse Comics.
Oh yeah.
I didn't realize they've been around so long.
Yeah.
And when I went back and I started to read the story, how they've now made a real good living, a real good base out of being the continuation of maybe TV shows that got canceled and things. And they clearly the fans want more of that.
Yeah.
So Dark Horse has made a really nice niche market for themselves, being the continuation of those stories. The one that comes to mind is Firefly.
Sure. Yeah, Firefly is great. It's got a huge fan base, and if they could get the IP for it, you can do so much. And there's a Dark Horse also. They did Star Wars way back when. I think Marvel's taken over that since then. But they've done a ton of stuff. So
the project I'm most excited about is, and who knows whether it'll even happen, is after Joss Whedon quit. I wouldn't call it quit. After he announced he wasn't going to return to any, he was done with Marvel for the time being. He finished Age of Ultron and he was tired out. He was talking about creating a comic, a sort of Victorian female Batman kind of character.
I didn't hear that, but
Twist
that sounds great.
Was the name of the character, and there's some initial some concept art that's kicking around.
I haven't seen it yet. That
and
sounds great.
then he I set my Google alert. And it's not dinging, so maybe it's stalled.
Still in development.
Yeah,
that's the other thing when you're talking about how comic creation. The big thing too is this is my issue, and not to knock anything that people come up. Everyone has great ideas or great characters they want to produce. Drawing comics is hugely laborious, and when you look at any comic that you pick up, there's not just one person touching that. It's not one artist. You probably have someone who penciled it, someone who inked it, and then somebody who took it and put the digital colors, and then even someone who does all the lettering. So there could be at least 5-6 people working on any single page you look at,
and that doesn't include the writer.
And that's not even, we're not even talking about the writer,
which
editor.
Could be a writer's room, right? I mean, you get some of these bigger comic properties, that could be several people that are writing those stories.
Oh yeah, so. I think you can YouTube when they did the death of Superman, and how you can YouTube how they had the writer's room, and they were just bouncing all these ideas of how they want to do things, and it was this huge big event for DC in the 90s, how they were going to kill Superman with Doomsday. So it was interesting to see that, but I'm sure some like DC and Marvel have these big writers' room that have some just amazing, talks of what the characters and how they're going to cross over to different, titles and everything.
That's a totally exciting idea for me to be a part of a project on that scale. My background's in theater, and there's big collaborative art, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So Aaron is one of the founders of Numina. Mm-hmm. I'm going to learn to say that right. Numina. And we're going to have his partner Phil back at some point in time, partner in the comics. Phil back, and Phil and Aaron and I are going to talk about Numina and the plans that he has for the future. But this is just a quick look. I hope that you're as fascinated as I am about what it takes to put a comic together, and I look forward to having you back.
I would love to talk with you. I love talking with you anytime.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.